to the VCA Voice's 50th episode. I'm your host, Dr. Marie Kerl, and we're so happy to celebrate this milestone and continue sharing important discussions around our care, culture, and the communities we serve at VCA Animal Hospitals. Here's to looking at another 50 episodes, exploring all the different ways we are proactively supporting the future of veterinary medicine through our experienced pet care professionals. On today's episode, I'm proud to welcome Dr. Todd Lavender, who's the Chief Transformation Officer of Mars Veterinary Health. Hi, Todd. How are you?
Hey, Marie. How are you?
I'm doing well. I finally got you on the podcast. So.
Yes, you did. I sent my daughter as a surrogate for one, and now you got me.
Well, I really appreciate you joining, and we don't get to talk as often as we did, so this will be a lot of fun. To start off with, I'd like to learn a little bit about your journey in veterinary medicine.
Yeah, I tell the story quite often. My father was a veterinarian. My wife is a veterinarian. And as everyone has probably learned at this point, 2 of my 3 children will be veterinarians very soon. So it is my passion. I've been a practice owner. I've been a medical director. I have been very engaged in the profession for a lifetime. And I think for me, it's one of the things that really connects me to some of the changes we had to make at VCA and some of the growth we had to go through over the last few years, as well as this new role.
How did you come to be a member of VCA?
It was never an intention. So I ended up selling my hospital that I bought over 30 years ago. And the reality is I sold it because I was going to, for raising a family at the time, very young family, looking at trying to open another one. So I sold it to a group who was very quickly acquired by VCA, and really the whole time thinking, I'll do this for a little bit and buy some time until I can build my own hospital. But I really, really came to love the culture at VCA and the things we stood for around medical quality and really, really the client-facing piece of who we were and are. It was probably 10 years into my early career being a regional medical director, understanding who we were, but probably 10 years in the career still thinking, if this doesn't work out, I can always go do my thing. And here I sit, having been in multiple roles in the company, from regional medical director to the first recruiter in VCA, one of your direct reports. But we'll say that's not true, but it's very true. I was the first doctor recruiter in VCA, and then go into operations for the balance of the last 20 years at VCA, and obviously becoming president at some point.
So when you became the president at VCA, you were only the 3rd person in that role. Is that correct?
That is correct. I took over from Doug Drew, who's now the Mars Veterinary Health Global President. But, I came to become quite good friends with the 3 founders over the years. And for me, it was really about trying to continue the legacy of who we were as a company, what they built, which is very unique in the profession. They bought their first hospital in 1985 and really trying to build something different profession, which was not really looked on very positively, and then trying to build it into something that's been extremely positive, both for me as part of that growth, but also for the profession and the things we've been able to change and make better for the profession over the last 30 to 40 years. So, following the footsteps is never easy when you're the 3rd person in line, but I still have regular conversations with those 3 and really talking about where we are as a company and the things we're trying to do for the profession. And they're kind of my surrogate fathers. My father passed away when I was in vet school. So, those guys became great mentors to me, all and where you've met them, but very different guys, but a very, very well-balanced, I'll call them a team. They didn't really see themselves that way, but really thinking about the vision they had and how do we carry it forward and grow up and really be a force in a very positive way in this profession, I think was important to them. As they made changes and began to grow in a very difficult environment back then, where people saw corporate veterinary medicine, if we label it that way, which I'm not a fan of, but if we label it that way, had a very negative connotation, which is now built into something very positive.
You started in 2019, and within a few short months, March of 2020 happened, and the COVID-19 pandemic hit us. Share with me some of the emotions that happened in those early days, and how do you think we ultimately weathered that storm?
Obviously, nobody wanted to go through that or wishes that on anyone to go through a global pandemic when you're running a business of this breadth. But we sat in a room when COVID first began, and people said, a couple of weeks, everything back to normal. And 2 years later, it still wasn't. But there was so much unknown. I mean, we shuttered hospitals, trying to still provide as best veterinary medicine we could, but clients weren't coming, and our staff was hard to get in the building, and we went quickly to curbside, trying to solve that connection as we try to still take care of the pets in these communities. And there was a lot of emotion around it, around the things, and trying to keep people safe, and not really knowing at that point. I mean, nobody did, to be fair, about what was next step, how we were going to deal with the pandemic from both a health and safety and a well-being issue, but then what's it going to do to the business, which is as an operational team, you have to think about those things. And we literally sit in a room thinking, this is going to be a terrible year, and there's nobody's going to come to the hospitals because everybody's going to be afraid. And quite frankly, as we all felt, like that kind of the opposite occurred when people sat at home by themselves, wondering, I'm lonely and I want a pet. So everybody found avenues to buy them or adopt them. It was quite phenomenal. I guess the key pivot point for me was, as we do a fair amount of boarding in our businesses, and we actually at that point owned a group called Camp Bow Wow, and it was solely boarding and training. And as you can imagine, there was no travel going on. Nobody could travel across the country or the world. People were canceling trips, vacations. And about 3 days into it, we had a Mars call. And, we were having these conversations about, do we need to talk about layoffs? Do we need to start talking about furloughing people? Because there was literally nobody boarding their pet at that time, as you remember. So I got on a call with Doug and his team, and Paul Wyrock, who was at the time the president of Pet Care, and Grant Reed, who was the president of Mars at the time. And we had these conversations, very hard conversations about people, and knowing how it would affect their families. And Grant Reed essentially stopped the call and said, this is not who we are as a company. We are going to support these people through the pandemic. And we are going to pay these associates regardless of whether there's work or not until we decide otherwise. And for me, that was a pivotal moment about what Mars meant and the family meant. Taking care of the associates in the hospitals was very impactful to me, that we could it wasn't a business decision. It was the right decision to take care of people. And we did through the entire pandemic, where there were people we tried to find, to try to utilize some of these folks in other places, but there were outliers where we didn't have a VCA, a Blue Pearl, or a Banfield hospital nearby, and we paid them. And up until we could find some work for them. So it was a pretty pivotal moment for me as a leader, understanding that this is what the culture and even Mars is about. And as you well know, for 40 years, when we have community events like wildfires and hurricanes, and we support those communities by allowing free boarding for people to bring their pets to us when they have nowhere to go as well. So I think for me, the culture really, really started to dovetail that point, that it was really for the family about doing the right thing.
So now that we're all the way through the pandemic, and hopefully and at the other end, what are some lessons learned for veterinary medicine as a whole?
I think the lesson for people looking inside this business that I guess they didn't realize, some people that don't live in what we do every day, is the resiliency of people. And they're really true at their core. They want to take care of pets. And I think for me, that was, I know you and I knew that. I don't think people appreciated that going into the pandemic.
Right.
Is that we were going to be there one way or another to make sure that pets had care. And we are integral to a lot of things that go on in the world. And taking care of pets is only one aspect of veterinary medicine. As you've experienced, we have veterinarians that do research with COVID, who did studies with COVID, who really, they don't understand the impact that the profession of veterinarians specifically have on their own lives, be it through food production or research or some of the things that we all get involved in from a One Health perspective with humans. So I think it was a great eye-opening event, especially for people in Mars, understanding that, we're going to keep going.
So you coined the phrase taking care of the future of veterinary medicine, which really has become part of our identity within VCA. Why are you passionate about that?
Yeah, early 19, before the pandemic, as Mars Veterinary Health started to come together, we had a lot of conversation about opportunities and business-related things. And I said, I think we have an obligation, because if we can't affect positive change in this profession, I don't know who can. I mean, having been a former practice owner, I think I did a pretty good job, but I sat in my own little bubble and I can only affect change in those four walls. I think we have that opportunity to do more, looking at health and well-being and some of the things we did very early on, helping people through COVID and some of their own personal health and well-being crises, I think was really started to change the profession, the way we care for people. I say a lot of times, I look through the lens of my kids. For me, if I look through the lens of my two children, one who's finishing vet school here in the next few months and the other will finish in 2 years, I truly do think about, how can I, as both a father and a leader, impact this profession to make it better? So I sit with them and have those types of conversations with them about, what do they hear from their classmates? What do they hear from their peers that isn't working for them? It's just impactful as both a leader and I have my own little study group with them to understand how they're feeling and how they feel in the profession. They ask me questions about what it used to be like, because again, I have a different perspective when I think about my father who, graduated in his early 60s and was doing mixed animal, and that was what everybody did. I mean, nobody just did small animal for the most part, unless you lived in a big city, working 100 hours a week, taking, mercy calls overnight. And he affected change because he decided, well, maybe my mother decided for him, that he wasn't going to take emergency calls anymore. And he and 6 other veterinarians in the city of Atlanta opened the very first emergency clinic in Atlanta to try to create quality of life. And if I think back about working 80 hours a week and then making decisions for myself and the family, that I just wasn't going to do that anymore. And I think these kids are looking at it the same way, right? They're trying to figure out, like, what does it look like for them moving forward? And really, frankly, you've heard me say it 100 times, the most amazing profession, regardless of what path you take in it. It's very rewarding. And I think if we can, continue to help them figure out what's the right balance. Now, at times it swings the wrong way. They have to take some responsibility for themselves to create some balance at home. But this profession and the people that you come across will make lasting impressions on you. And it frankly is just a lot of fun. It is the lens I go through when we start having even business decisions at VCA around would my kids want to work here kind of thing. And I think for me, that's been the key for me developing who I am as both a leader and a father.
So given your unique lens into the current vet student experience and what's happening, can you tell me 2 or 3 issues or things that they're worried about in addition to work-life balance and quality of life in the profession?
Yeah. I mean, I think if I'll go back to the COVID issue, I think those kids in the middle of COVID, regardless of whether it was in higher education or not, it truly affected them. And I think that, we stepped up quite a bit to try to figure out how we could help those students coming out of COVID and try to support them. But I think in the end, they're afraid, and that's it seems simple. And people are like, well, they've, 8 years of schooling, and why are they afraid? You and I, we came out of vet school, got kind of thrown into it and said, just go do it, which I think was probably not the best thing for our health and well-being at the time, but we somehow survived. They are afraid and they need support, but they're very capable. And I think once they learn what they think they don't know, and some of the muscle memory around things and how we help expose them early on to things and techniques and procedures, I think is key to their education. But their education can't stop. And I've said many times, my education as a veterinarian never stopped. I mean, I was hopefully always learning something and trying to get better. But their education certainly doesn't stop when they graduate, when they throw the tassel across their cap. It is about them to continue to learn as a veterinarian and being thirsty for that knowledge. They're better at that than we were, I think. Yep. I think they truly want to learn. We have to give them the ability and the outlets to learn and to know when to let go of the hand to let them become who they are. And they will all get there at their different pace. But, if I look at what's happening with NAVLE pass rates and other things with the kids, they struggle. I mean, COVID damaged them in a way from a learning perspective. I think we have to be there to help them because it doesn't mean they can't be great veterinarians. It just means they had a bump in the road of learning and we need to figure out how to fill that gap.
Well, when I was in education, I think that fear of getting started was common. And really all my students who were finishing and going out into the workforce, I would tell them as an educator, we'll find a place where you get good mentorship, but really with no ability to be able to see into individual practices and know that. And I'm very proud of the mentorship and internship programs we have that are primarily focused for new graduates. that our VCA Academy Mentorship Program is a great start for students wanting to go into private practice and to students wanting to go into primary care or into emergency practice, where they get a mentored experience with veterinarians that are there to help guide them. And then obviously our focus on rotating internships and making those programs sustainable, partly from a, certainly increasing pay, which was low, but also making sure that our programs, all different, but all strong learning experiences, and they also are able to have appropriate time off. And, it's not the old internship experience of 100 hours a week and no vacation. So I'm really proud that we led that charge and are making that positive impact. So another area that I know that you really focused on is the role of the veterinary team and the crucial importance of credential veterinary technicians to our profession. Talk to me a little bit about that.
If I look at the population of technicians, things that really bothered me early on were the turnover rates of some really good people, about not feeling a career path in the profession, turning over everything, staying in the profession 3 or 4 years and really not feeling grounded. So yes, it's you and I's next uphill battle to get people like us, the doctors in the room, to accept them as true professionals, which they are, every one of them, give them the ability to learn in a way and let them do their jobs and get out of their way. It's always the interesting thing for me when I go to hospitals is, sometimes the number of doctors, more times than not, outnumbers the number of licensed veterinary technicians. And I see businesses that could run more efficiently with, not that we're doing this, but less doctors and more technicians, because that was how I built my own team in my own hospital. I mean, I could do the work, frankly, of 3 veterinarians if I had 8 technicians. And people say they want that, but they need to let them do their roles. And one of the things we're working on, certainly at Mars Veterinary Health, is, people are unaware about licensure restrictions and how different the practice acts across 50 states, and allowing these very qualified people to do the jobs that support us as veterinarians differs state to state. So if we can try to figure out, one status quo of this is what technicians should be able to do, and this is what we feel they're capable of, I think some of the things we've been able to do, even in the last year or two, trying to set them up in a way to be successful, to see patients in the right way through indirect or direct supervision of veterinarians, is very key to staying in that profession in a way to make it meaningful for them so they feel like they join it and they want to stay in it.
This past May, you stepped away from the VCA president role to become the Chief Transformation Officer at Mars Veterinary Health. The burning question on everybody's mind is, what the heck is a Chief Transformation Officer?
Yeah, and frankly, sometimes I wonder too. Everything we've talked about today around the future of veterinary medicine and what we can do to make it better, make it more inclusive around people, especially the technicians, working through trying to make the workplace a better place for veterinarians as a whole, changing this profession. I can name off all the projects, be it, Voyager or Gulliver or that I'm working on that all have funny names. But the reality is the true focus is, how do we make the profession better through technology or people or the ways of working of people? But the end result being, how do we make our hospitals as accessible as possible to clients who need us to take care of their pets? Leveraging the teams to create career pathing for technicians who deserve it, and just looking into unique problems that no one's ever been able to just single out and look at and say, is that a problem we want to solve? So yes, it's a title, but I right now probably 10 to 12 projects ranging from implementing a practice management software across all the businesses in Mars Veterinary Health in 20 some odd countries, and working on technician workflows, looking at licensure across 50 states, working with universities, trying to figure out how we show up as a group better on campus, helping the kids on campus, which I do call them next. I have 2 kids in vet school. How do we show up better, or how do we help them understand who we are as a group, regardless of whether you join in the States, Blue Pearl, VCA, or Banfield, and across the globe with the multiple groups of Mars Veterinary Health, really how do we help bring them along as well as the journey we've already been on in some ways. So it's a really, really smart, capable people, and I have a lot of fun working with them.
Yeah, it is tremendously fun. And this really highlights, I think, the scale of Mars Veterinary Health. How does Mars Veterinary Health really allow us to rapidly address some of these unmet needs in our profession?
It is amazing the breadth of things we can do, but we've got a lot of things we need to do, and the impact we can make as we lead. And it's not in a conceited way. I think it's really about trying to do the right thing by the profession and those professionals in it. I think we have the ability to affect change and show change, like we talked about earlier with the internship salaries. People will follow, and I think that's been happening at VCA for 40 years. I mean, you think about the changes we made, for the non-veterinary professionals that may ever listen to this, may not understand this, but I'll say 20 years ago, Rory, we decided to take, no good call with veterinarians is good without talking about poop, is that we decided to take fecals out of our hospitals for better quality, right? And to ship them into Antec. And people said that will never work. And look at what's happened over 20 years. I mean, we have better diagnostic testing, we have better results, we have better, clear communication to clients about how to help deal with their pets. There's a lot of things we were told won't work, and there were many that did not. But we have been on the forefront of change in veterinary medicine as a group and a company for 40 years. And the naysayers who now recognize are now our champions. And I think that that's the key piece for me. It's not to control, it's to create, and to create change in a profession to see how do we make it better? And again, back to the lens of my kids, how do I make it better for them? How to remove pain points in their days, how to remove pain points in their lives, and really make this a better place where I can look back 10 years from now and say, I did this with the help of this team.
Yeah, some of what you're talking about really also highlights the entrepreneurial spirit that has always been in VCA. I love the passion and I love the focus on quality medicine, but I also love that so many things start from a great suggestion in a hospital and they grow up from there. Having an organization that is as large as ours with that level of entrepreneurial spirit, I think is probably unusual.
It is, though. You've been on a few acquisitions. We've been an mergers and acquisition company at VCA since the beginning. And I would always, and you go to the hospital visit, when we first acquire a hospital, and teams are like, what are you going to do to us? I said, well, the first thing we're going to do is steal one of your great ideas, right? Because we did. I mean, we learned at a pace that otherwise would have taken much longer if we didn't acquire hospitals over the last 40 years. Because we learned some really great techniques, some really great change management that otherwise we'd have had to come up with our own. And there's so many bright minds in this profession to be able to meet some, if you think about the people you have met in your career through VCA, it's pretty remarkable. And now the people you now get to meet through Mars Veterinary Health, it's pretty amazing. Like you talk to people in other countries on the regular, right? So I don't think we ever sat back and said, we know everything. But I do think that we have been a constant learning model for 40 years, and Mars Veterinary Health is now doing that globally as well.
And that is, honestly, it's one of the reasons I started this podcast is we have so many amazing people in all levels of our organization. And I really just wanted those stories out and to hear from our associates and learn more that way. I still learn new things every single day and love talking to people that are with us and elsewhere in the profession as well.
Yeah, it's a tremendous amount of fun.
Well, Todd, I'd love to continue talking with you. I think that we're about out of time. So in closing, tell me what the most important way that old folks like us, since we've been in the practice a similar amount of time, can continue to evolve and grow to understand the future needs of veterinary healthcare.
Yeah, I think there's one word that comes to mind when we talk about this is listen. Just listen. And don't be afraid. I mean, I think, again, I've had to do this in my career multiple times. And going to a new role, I would say I don't get scared about it, but it's a little scary not understanding what this was going to be. But I think listening, I mean, that's the part for me, my kids, I listen. Now, believe me, there's times I say no, but because you have to as a parent. But
sure.
I think listening to people and valuing people's input and opinion, whether you align with it or not, I think is an important thing for us all to do, whether we're talking about veterinary medicine or the world today. Because certainly I think we need to appreciate, listen, and appreciate people's opinions, whether you agree with them or not. And I think we'll all be in a better place.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Well, Todd, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for finally agreeing to join, and great to talk with you.
Talk to you later.
Thank you for listening in to today's 50th VCA Voice episode. We hope you enjoyed it and learned a few helpful tips. As we continue to share more discussions each month, make sure to subscribe to our channel and follow VCA Animal Hospitals on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram to stay in the loop. Don't forget to leave a review for today's episode and share with friends. We're looking forward to you listening in on our 100th episode. For more inspiring stories, visit our website at vcavoice.com.